If you don't mind, and you can, I would love to see some faces. Thank you, Stephen. If you're in the bathroom or otherwise indisposed, obviously don't, but thank you guys for turning on. It's always great when presenting. Let me start presenting what I have to share with you. And okay, and we're off. Okay, so good afternoon. I guess it's noon. My name is Marcus Castain, and I work at UCLA Anderson. I'm a proud Bruin, having graduated from Anderson 25 years ago, but I just returned to the campus about half a year ago, and I'm the instructor for what we call the Parker Career Series, which focuses on full-time MBA students to prepare them for careers, which obviously includes the decisions that they make, and then the tools that they use, including resumes and cover letters. And then I also advise MBA students. I work with lots of different students, but particularly focus on those who are interested in social impact and energy and clean tech or in entrepreneurship. So today, this is actually, I was just learning that this is really the first of, I think, 3 related panels that you're going to hear separately from 2 of my colleagues who are going to address other areas related to career management. But I think this is a great place to start, where we'll be talking. I'm going to give you a bit of a career management overview about how we think about career management and getting a new job at Anderson, about your value proposition, which I'll explain, your resume, and your cover letter. So some of this is a little bit more theoretical and related to decision making, and others more tactical. So let's get into it. I'd love to start out actually just by asking what questions you have, so that I am sure that I'm talking to the audience and on topics that are of interest to you. So if you can, go to slido.com and enter in that number, 1723057, and type out the questions you have, so that we can see what everybody is curious about. And I'm going to shift over here so we can take a look at the answers together. Great. All right, well, okay, so I see two or three people typing. Let's go through these quickly and then we'll get into this. Should the address be included on a resume? Not your physical address. You can list Los Angeles or the city that you live in. But nowadays, LinkedIn address, yes. Email address, of course. Telephone number, sure. How far back should resumes go? We'll go over that. How to ask for a raise promotion. I don't know if that's really so much in the scope of what we'll talk about. I'll see if I can work that in. Education, top or bottom? Short answer is it depends on what stage of your career at. If you're a very recent graduate, then put education at the top. Otherwise, put it below and lead with experience. Page limit for resume cover letters, we'll talk about. Switching roles, we'll talk about. How do I know what to include and still keep it to one page? We'll talk about what to include, what resume templates to use. The real answer is so long as it's professional and works for you. But we'll get into that. If your focus is unclear, we'll talk about making decisions somewhat. How to get your resume to stand out. We'll do all of these things. Improving my resume. Yep. And we'll definitely talk about value proposition. So thank you for sharing all of that. I do think that the presentation I have prepared will address that. Let me get this back up. All right. So as I mentioned, at Anderson, we have this thing called the Parker Career Series. We spend 15 weeks going over all of these topics that we start in the summer and go through the end of the fall quarter. And that has a lot of homework. Today, we're going to hit on a couple of the major topics that you can see not shaded out. I'm glad that Chris Weber, one of my colleagues, who is now an assistant dean at Anderson, is going to come and talk to you about interviewing. And then Dave Cooley, who works on our alumni side, is going to talk about networking. Is that right, Grace? Networking and informational interviewing. So I'm not going to address those topics, knowing that that is coming up in your series shortly. But we're going to talk about product market fit. How do you make these decisions and how to develop your focus? And then value prop, I'll define what that is, your resume and your cover letters. So our frame, since we are a business school, we use the language of business to talk about looking for a job and focusing on a career. And the core concept that we use is called product market fit, which is very popular in Silicon Valley and with entrepreneurial startups. And the idea is that there are a million markets out there. You need to define your market, and that is inevitably going to be a niche. And then define yourself as that product and articulate the features and benefits that you have as a product and communicate yourself to that market. So think about this like from a very top level of product market fit. There is a market for you. You may have to change yourself. You may have to change how you communicate to that market in order to be successful. And we inevitably find students are way too broad in terms of what they're focusing on. Well, I'm really open to anything. I just want to work in technology, preferably in California. It was like, well, you need to hone it down so that you know where to focus your marketing effort. So, other part in terms of general guidance is when you're out there, and I'm sure that Dave Cooley will spend a lot of time talking about this. But it's really about expressing interest in other people and showing curiosity in the roles that you're interested in applying for. And the hard sell rarely works. Sometimes it works, but usually what works a lot more often is the soft sell of getting to know people, showing genuine enthusiasm and interest in them, and engaging them as a human being. And people will be far more receptive to that approach. And then along with that, people remember top level things. A lot of times our students, they want to like get in all exactly the right words in the right order that they have practiced it in. And it's really about building emotional connections with people. That's what people will remember. And then they'll remember the top level. Oh, you worked in such and such department, or you climbed to the top of this big mountain. And that is what they'll remember. We have one student right now, and she was a principal of a charter school that she helped found. And she did really well in consulting and interviews, and she got an offer from Deloitte Consulting. And everybody's like, oh, you're the principal. Like that was her whole identity. She became the principal because she was the principal of a school. And that brought with it a whole bunch of positive associations for them. So in terms of making your decisions, you really need to nail down the answers to these 5 questions. And I wouldn't think this comes to the question about focus, about trying to answer or chart out your career for a long time. The idea that the economy, the market, labor market changes so rapidly that the idea of strategic planning really has come out of fashion, unless you're making enormous capital investments that are going to take 30 or 50 years to price out. And especially for a human being where we can change on a dime, really 3 years is probably a good time frame to look at. And so the first point is, what is your industry? We sometimes say, what is your vertical? And the more precise that you can get, probably the more successful you are going to be around that one. The second question is, what is your job function? Are you in marketing? Are you in research? Are you in fundraising? Are you in administration? How do you provide value to the organization that you're a part of? And are you looking to pivot, or are you looking to advance? You're looking to lateral, you want to go to a different organization or a different unit within this large organization that we're all a part of, and switch, do the same function, but for a different unit. Your geography, are you open to relocating? How far are you willing to commute? If you're saying, no, I'm here, I'm in LA and my family's in LA and there's no way I'm moving, well, then don't spend any time looking outside of LA unless there are remote opportunities. And of course, there are more and more opportunities that are remote today. We even have a colleague who joined at the same time I did, who came to us from UC Merced, and he comes down to UCLA once every few weeks. The rest of the time, he's entirely virtual, and it's working out for everybody. So, of course, the hybrid is, increasing the way that many employers are moving. Compensation, know the number below which you won't go, but also what's the number that makes you really happy that you would really like to shoot for. If you're looking for jobs and they're below that number, like, why are you wasting your time? Of course, increasingly salaries are becoming more and more transparent, although you do see quite large salary ranges, including at UCLA. And then the intensity of work that you want to do. Do you want to work really hard, or you're in a place where you want work-life balance? And across all of these things, you need to prioritize what is most important to you. And if you don't know the answers to these things, then that should be your first thing to work on. Don't worry about your resume or how you present yourself in interviews. You want to figure out where you want to focus, because other than that, you're just kind of, I don't know, blindly going through the dark, looking for something that sounds of interest to you. So really focus your effort on this. So here's an example about what this could look like. Geography, number 1, can't leave Los Angeles, open to Orange County, perhaps. Grant administration in higher education, job function, grant administrator, the salary numbers, want to work-life balance. Okay, when you go out to the market and you start talking to these people, then this, and Dave Cooley is going to talk about networking and informational interviewing, people can respond to this. It gives them something tangible to work with and help you to connect you. Actually, before we move on, any questions about this, what we call the top 5?
A quick question. Can you explain a little bit more about industry vertical?
So, good question. So, industries, we're all in higher education, and so that can be the industry. But you may say, well, I work in facilities. I could do facilities for lots of large campuses. It doesn't have to be higher education. Or maybe you're like, no, I love being in higher education, but I'm particularly interested only in health campuses, or I'm focused on the liberal arts. So the more specific you can be about that industry, and then the industry knowledge that you bring, the easier it is with networking and identifying the roles that you're interested in. Any other questions? Or Grace, did I answer that?
Yep. And then just a few questions about whether you can share these slides later on.
Yeah, sorry, I'll also turn on my chat there, move that down here. Yes, I'll send this to you if you can disseminate them.
Absolutely, thank you.
Oh, and then you asked the question about education specifically as an industry. Education is an industry. It's a weird industry in a lot of ways because it's so fragmented by all of the academic disciplines and then the different kinds of functions, a la a health system or a hospital or facilities or housing, that you could make an argument, well, I'm in both, hospitality because I work in this housing, but I also work at UCLA and that's higher education. And it really, I would say, what do you want to be? So if you define it as I want to stay in the hospitality area, well, then that opens up a whole bunch of hotels and resorts and maybe other large corporate campuses that could be of interest to you versus you're on the academic side or you're on the research side. But even on the research side, maybe like we're at UCLA, and so like, well, there's other universities in town, not as good as ours, but other ones that are out there. People like that could also open up doors like Rand, for example, that is deeply into research, even though they have a little graduate school in there, but most people think of it as a research organization as opposed to a higher education institution. Okay, so people who get the jobs are not always the most qualified because you're not competing against the whole labor market. You're competing against the stack of other people who have submitted an application for it. So the first thing is you got to get out there and apply, and then being comfortable with yourself, being present, responding authentically, being a normal human being who people want to spend time with during the recruiting interactions. It's not about the precision of the answers usually. I mean, there are some times where technical, you need to know your technical details for whatever function it is that you're competing in. But a lot of times people hire other people that they want to work with. So always remember throughout all of your recruiting interactions and especially your interviews about how people are perceiving you. Okay, so onto a value proposition. So value proposition is a business term. It's in particular a marketing term. And we hit this point really hard because a lot of job candidates only focus on the left-hand side. This is who I am. Let me tell you about where I went to college and all of my career experiences and all the skills that I have. And they neglect that the employer is just like the rest of us as human beings, which is very self-interested and primarily concerned not so much about all of your story as can you do the job that I need to be done? So the value proposition is the intersection of those two things. It is what you have to offer that satisfies what I am looking for, right? So let's get into this a little bit deeper. I looked at UCLA jobs, and this is one of the featured jobs right now. And it is for a chief administrative officer in the history department here at UCLA. What do you think might be a compelling value proposition for this job? And this is the participative part, so please feel free to speak up.
If you have had like any experience that is one-to-one similar to what they're looking for.
Sure, but help us out, Erica, with a little bit more detail about what that could be. What do you think they're looking for?
Somebody.
I know you're just saying this, so.
Yeah, somebody who has the opportunity to work in a fast-paced environment while wearing multiple hats. So if you can establish that you've already done something similar and that it would be transferable, I guess in that aspect.
Yep. I think for sure that's a part of it. I also see some other good suggestions in the chat. What do we have? Oh, bunch. Good. Okay.
Yeah, people management.
Financial planning skill, fund management experience working with academics, understand their expectations, fund management and operations. So of course, this is just the job summary, but the employer is going to tell you what exactly this job is about, right? And what exactly you need to know in order to do it. Kobe said, I like that last one, it just came in, a CAO from a smaller department that has fund management, leadership, personnel experience. Yes, that person would be very competitive for this job. So I color coded this because it's a lot of words. So I just wanted to speed this up a little bit. What do all of these yellow things, you don't have to read every single one, what do they seem to be about? What are they looking for across all of these different yellow things?
Majority of them have the word management in there.
Exactly. Yes. So and how many of them? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of the 11 or 12 are looking for management. So you have to have a lot of management experience in order to come forward to be successful at this job. Clearly. The next thing, we have 2 that are similar. What are these green ones about?
People skills.
People skills. You have to be good at working with other people. Our blue ones?
Policy and fund management.
Policy management, very higher ed specific, right? This is very industry domain specific. And then the last 2? Computer technology, yeah. So if you're competing for this job, this is what you have to have. And you want to formulate your whole approach to address these, to develop a value proposition that is going to resonate. And far and away, you see 7 of the 12 or so skills are related to management. So they are looking for somebody who is a really good manager, who's good at working with other people, strong interpersonal leadership abilities, who has some domain expertise and is good with technology. So that's the value proposition that you would want to put together, taking what it is that you have. Well, and if frankly, if you're coming from a place, well, I'm really good at contracts and grants management, and I'm really tech savvy, but I've never led a large organization before. Just be realistic with yourself. You're not going to be competitive for this job. On the other hand, if you're coming from a really strong management perspective, and I realize all of these, most of these say required, the 2 that are actually preferred are the domain expertise jobs. So if you're a really solid manager, savvy with technology and great interpersonal, then you're going to be competitive for this. So how do you put this together for yourself? Identify your target audience and their needs. So that's finding job descriptions that are of interest to you. Sometimes we have students gather a bunch of job descriptions and put them together and say, okay, you're interested in this whole set. And what, how do we define your value proposition for this set of companies? Now, the value proposition can change from employer to employer, but if you're looking across a bunch of, let's say, CAO jobs, they should be relatively similar to each other. And so your value proposition for that customer segment can be the same. And we're going to get to that question. We're just on our way there about once we have the value proposition, how do we reframe our resume? We're just at the first part of that right now. Then identify your strengths. What are you good at that's relevant to what they have? Connect your strengths to your target role. Provide evidence and success stories. And so within your resume, within your interviewing, when you're networking with people, you're going to tell stories that map back to the strengths that you have and summarize them succinctly in 2 to 3 sentences. That's kind of for the value proposition itself. Sometimes we frame that as an elevator pitch, a 30-second pitch, to articulate what it is that you bring. So here's an example. I asked one of our second-year students if I could use who I worked with, and he agreed. I know this is a little different from what probably most of you in higher education are looking at, but this is where many MBAs are right now. So he's interested, his target audience, he's interested in consulting role for a strategic consulting firm. So his targeting audience is a strategy consulting hiring manager. The strengths that he felt like he had to offer were leadership, work ethic, and analytics. How does he connect his strengths to the target role? The way he defined it is consulting firms need highly analytical people to do a lot of drudgery work in uncertain environments. Now, some people would argue about the drudgery, but this is his definition. He's like, this is not glamorous work for the most part. You know, we're getting in, we don't, there's a lot of uncertainty. We're trying to bring a lot of data to solve analytical problems. We'll never have perfect information, and we're constantly moving and going on to the next client. So his evidence is success stories. He graduated from the Naval Academy. He had worked on Navy warships. He was getting his MBA, and then he had done a summer internship for a consulting firm called LEK. So he was far weaker than many of our students who compete for these roles on the analytical skills, people who had been financial analysts or worked for Wall Street firms or done other analysis roles. Where he was really strong was on the leadership part, and he could tell great stories about Navy service and you know, and the drudgery of having an all-night shift on a ship and needing to grind through that. And so when he put all of this together, it came out, this was his 30-second pitch. I am interested in strategy consulting. My experience at the Naval Academy and on Navy warships taught me how to be an effective leader, even when the work is tedious. My summer internship at LEK confirmed that consulting involves a lot of non-glamorous analytical work under tight timelines, but I like the pressure and analytical challenges and know that I can thrive in this kind of environment. So that's how you package all of this together. And then this goes into, and we're going to get to this, into the cover letter and into the resume. Any questions before we leave the topic of value propositions? Okay, so cover letter comes next. I was going to ask this question, but I just gave you the answer. So cover letter consists of a header at the top with your contact information, opening, your introduction, and you want to emphasize any connections that you have made in a company or this company. So who do you know that's working in the unit? Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's somebody in this group, maybe it's somebody you did an informational interview with and they encouraged you to apply for this role. But that you can then go to that person, this hiring manager, whether they're in HR or they're the hiring manager, may go to that person and say, hey, what do you think? What do you think about Grace? Should she come join our team? And then that gives an opportunity for that person to be engaged, and also shows that you've done your homework. Your body. Why this company? Why this role? Why do you want to make this switch? And remember, the value proposition speaks specifically to what you can provide to the company, not just why it's good for you. Well, sometimes we see these MBA cover letters and like, this is the right move for me, and I want to do this so bad because it's going to be so great and it's going to help advance my career. It's like, no, you are not speaking to what the company cares about. How can you provide value to them? And then closing, you know, if you're asking for an interview, probably if you're in UCLA, it's probably going to be more structured. They already, you know, have a job that you know about or that you've seen, maybe with a structured process, a polite close, signature line. So a well-written letter is very personalized. We can see generic letters and they're just really a waste. I had a student just last week send me, say, please review my cover letter, and said, dear recruiter, I would like to apply for company in brackets, for the role in brackets. And then it goes on, I have experience doing this, and I think it'll be helpful for company. And then it bolds some of their strongest strengths. And I said, this is not at all how you write a cover letter. And companies will see that. And it's really painful because it takes a lot of time to write a good letter, to articulate your value proposition. But you'll have far higher yield if you take that time and even more importantly, if you spend time networking, which I know is a different session that David Cooley's going to talk about. Concise and focused. One page is okay. Half a page is even better. So these do not have to be long letters. Always positive and value focused. You're never fleeing your bad environment or your horrible boss that you have. You are always attracted to the excitement and the great things of this new opportunity. So we're always positive. And you want to demonstrate that you know about this company, about this unit, why your background is going to be of value to the job to be done. So the common mistakes, talking the whole time about you or me, myself, and I. Obviously, any mechanical or grammatical errors sometimes, and especially in precision environments like higher education, that can just be a deal breaker. Oh my God, look at this typo. Especially people like me that are Gen Xers have zero tolerance for typos and bad grammar. Just throw it out. Stayed in the wrong company. I've seen this. Like you have your template and you're just like, oh, I'm chugging along with my template. We had a student mix up Adobe and Apple. Two companies that start with A. Well, you've just blown it with the other company. If you send them a letter and it's showing a different company. Writing too long, make it easy to read. Bullets are fantastic. Leaving track changes on. Sometimes that happens to people as well. And that's really embarrassing if it's a template and you've just changed it from Adobe to Apple. So here's an example. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I want to call out a couple parts of this. What do we see in the first paragraph?
No comma after from Skyping.
Good catch. Yep. That's actually not what I was going for, but I think
Oh.
grammatically.
Run-ons.
A little long, yeah, but not grammatically incorrect there. But what is he doing within this first paragraph to Microsoft? What is he accomplishing?
Introducing himself.
He's introducing himself, and how is he doing that?
He keeps saying my, I.
I know he's breaking my letters. This is supposed to be a good example, huh? You're right, but he's also talking about Microsoft, right? He can't use this same introduction. Thank you. Evelyn said, personal anecdote related to the company. Microsoft has meaningfully empowered me. I use Skype, which I think Skyping is now owned by Microsoft. He's using Teams, which is another Microsoft product. He's referencing what he's there to do, which is apply for this MBA sales internship. And he wants to bring the transformational impact of Microsoft technologies. Like there's a lot of love he's showing to Microsoft here. He's also dropping a name, and we think that's okay. Like we like that actually. And that actually comes up in the second paragraph through my conversations with Connor Douglas, and then he lays it on. If anything, when we went through this in the class together, everybody's like, you laid it on a little too thick, like a little over the top, but you get the point here. That he has done his homework. We talked to this guy, Connor Douglas. He talked to this guy, Sean Teague. He's really engaged and he's listing Microsoft's products. And then, oops, sorry, a little too fast there. Then he goes through, and some of this can be reused, what he's good at, enterprise technology sales. So he has worked for a semiconductor company representing multiple semiconductors to sell into different data centers. So you can see it down below, LinkedIn, Lyft, and Juniper Networks. LinkedIn is also another Microsoft company. Cross-functional collaboration, he talks a lot about LinkedIn here, and data-driven decision-making. These are all things, this is his value proposition in these 3 bullets that he believes that a salesperson at Microsoft should bring. And then he closes, drops a couple of more names, and says he hopes that he'll consider him. So I don't think it's perfect. And yeah, you kind of caught some of the little bit, it is a little long-winded. It could be a little bit shorter. But I think it covers the basics of what a cover letter should be. Okay, so I see a question. And maybe Grace, if you don't mind helping me if I miss any questions that come through. So many jobs posted are cagey about who is supervising the position. And even if you ask, they will often tell you to address the cover letter to HR. I prefer to personalize. Should I just run, not walk away from jobs where it's impossible to determine the name of the hiring manager? No, I wouldn't run away from that. And you're right, that is very common. And I had the conversation with him on here about that at Microsoft because he couldn't get in. So just write, dear Microsoft recruiting team, or dear hiring manager, or just start it out, put the organization and say, start out with from Skyping, comma, my childhood friends, blah, 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 start out with your opening. So if you can get the name of the person, that's better. Sometimes you can look it up and say, oh, I think the person in charge of this unit is this person here, so I'm going to address it to them. That is better. But I certainly wouldn't let it stop you from hiring or from applying.
So Marcus, I do see a couple questions on Slido. The first.
Oh, back over there. Thank you.
Yeah, the first is, should LinkedIn address be hyperlinked, or should they list out the entire web address like you see here?
I would list it out in case, well, first point is do what he did, which we have all of our MBA students do, which is go on to LinkedIn and shorten it so that it's just your name, or your name with your middle initial, or differentiate yourself. Hyperlinks, if this gets printed out, will get lost, right? So I would type it out.
Okay, and then the second question is a long cover letter, i.e. 2 pages, considered bad, or is it still acceptable?
I would say in most cases, shorter is better, and keep it to 1 page. So Claudia, yes, I agree with you. And that was, I guess there were 2 points of criticism of this letter. One, yes, it's a little lengthy, and 2, you laid it on a little bit too thick. And then question above that one was about fonts and using color. Unless it's something that's like graphics or very creative, especially if you're in higher education, keep it a little bit traditional and staid. Years ago, before I started doing this work, I said, it was probably like 2015. I was like, this is ridiculous. It's 2015. We can use color now, and we can have images. And I redid my resume, and I'm not a graphic designer, but I thought it looked pretty decent. And I didn't get any hits from that resume at all. And then I started working with a career coach, and it was like, oh my God, what are you thinking? And I don't know why, but I have since learned, like, no, resumes are very traditional, cover letters are very traditional, and don't think about getting fancy, unless maybe you're in an arts or graphics or kind of creative field where people might be more open to that. So
along the same line, in terms of formatting, is it the typical 1-inch margin, 12-point font? Okay.
Yeah. Easy to read. You just think about your audience. And if they have to find their glasses to read it, because you've shrunk down the font so that you can keep it to 1 page, but you have just another paragraph that you had to squeeze in there, then you're going, you're trying too hard. Less is more in this case. So, which is also true for the resume. Now, first point, given that we're in higher education, a resume is a different tool than a CV. I think sometimes CVs can be 5 or 6 pages. They have all the publications listed, everything the person has ever done. That is a different function from a resume. So I'm not talking about CVs, and the whole academic job market is a different beast. A resume should be easy to digest. Use a clean template, no images. Education, if you're a very recent graduate, within, you're getting a degree now, or within the next, you just got it within the last year or maybe 2 years, then you could still have your education at the top. If you're coming out of undergraduate, sure, lead with that at the top. Otherwise, lead with experience. Now, this is our MBA resume. Obviously, our students are our students. So that's why we have them. And this is our official template. One page, if you're like, I have a 2-page resume, but I'm 50 years old. And I do feel like the things that I did 10 years ago are still relevant. I like to think I'm grown, but like some of those experiences are things that are really relevant and I still have the skills to do them. So I carry them around on my resume. But when it goes back to 20 years, when I entered the job market, I've just listed the employer, but I don't have any detailed bullets underneath it. So if you're older in your career, if you've had a lot of job transitions, it's not helpful to have a huge laundry list of companies. So you may want to abridge some of that. The sections, typical sections are education, experience, additional. If you've done a lot of publications and that's important for the role you're going for, you might want to create a separate section called publications, or a second page that is an attachment, which lists the publications, or a link to a portfolio, a link to patents. There are ways around that, the one page. Functional resumes, we really love, and some of our students go in that way. If you've been at one place for a long time, say you've been at UCLA for 10 or 15 or 20 years, but you really want to highlight not just the tasks that you've done, but the skills that you have, you can kind of create a separate line, italicize. I'm really great at collaborative management, or grants administration, and then list a couple of those things that you have done, your major accomplishments there, and then something else within that. It's also, I feel like it's cheating in a totally ethical way, which is you get to claim credit for this skill by just putting it in there, and then you have some bullets that provide evidence for it. But for somebody who's just digesting it quickly, it's very easy to read, like, oh, that's right, this person is good at grants administration because it says right there in italics. White space, so don't cram everything in there. Don't ever go less than 10 point, 11 point font is better. I know we fall in love with our resume bullets. We are so proud because we worked so hard on each of these things and we sweat blood and tears for them. Share it with a friend, tell somebody to be critical. They won't have the same feelings about your bullets. Just like, cut that out there. Work with a career coach if you want. They'll help you to streamline it down and really push you. It's hard to self-edit frequently, but other people can be brutal in a way you can't be for yourself.
So, Marcus,
go ahead, Grace. Thank you.
Thoughts about using objective or summary on the resume at the top?
Oh, that's a good question. Personally, I like it, but it has to make sense for who you are. I think everything has to make sense for who you are, but it also has to be tailored. So sometimes you see an undergraduate write something of like, I'm looking for a forward-thinking, progressive, fast-growing organization where I can use my skills to the maximum and excel with growth opportunity. It's like you haven't narrowed things down whatsoever. So you've wasted your real estate and you've wasted my time in that kind of objective statement. But if we go back to that CAO role, it's like my objective is I'm looking for a role where I can use my management skills, management administration skills within higher education. I have experience in grants administration, fantastic interpersonal skills, something like that. Then it's much more tailored. It is your value proposition that you're sneaking into the top of your resume.
Okay, the next question is, what about leaving off experience that's not relevant to the job that you're applying for? And how can you explain it if it shows gap because you leave it off?
Sometimes it's hard to know, like in the abstract, it's a matter of looking at a resume. You don't want big gaps going on, so it may be better to just say, well, I was employed, I was doing this. It may not be relevant. It's like, I worked in entertainment for 10 years. This is what I did. Here's the name of the organization and the title, but I'm not going to get into any detail because I'm going to spend my valuable real estate, my valuable resume real estate on bullets that are relevant to this job.
Okay, that's
Great.
it.
Thanks for bringing those up because I'm not capturing everything that's going on in the, I think in the chat and in the Slido. So how do we write the core of our resume, which are those bullets? So pick the accomplishments that demonstrate the relevant skills that are relevant again for this job, and list the following for each accomplishment. What did you do? What was the situation? So, or what was the context? What was the challenge? I worked for this, I don't know, I'm making stuff up. I don't know. I worked at UCLA Housing and we had this budget gap. We had a revenue shortfall. That was the situation. What were the actions that you took? You did this analysis. You came out with, I don't know, a new pricing mechanism that boosted your enrollment. What were the results? You were able to improve the revenue and close the budget. So it's those three things that you put together. Obviously, that was a horrible example. I just made it up the top of my mind. S, A, and R that you're going to put together. And we actually have students go through an exercise of what are all your stories? What are the skills that you want to do? What is the situation for those? What is the action? What is the result? Now put that together into a statement. And that becomes a statement that you use. And then that also becomes an interview story that you're going to talk about when you have the time to interview. And you might even talk about it not in a formal interview, but in an informational interview where you squeeze it in as you're asking questions of the other person. So write each bullet so it includes the situation, action, and result of your accomplishment. Start with active verbs. You can Google and there'll be lists of good resume action verbs out there. And then show different verbs. You don't want the same thing. Like I love to use the word developed. And then sometimes I look and be like, oh my God, I wrote developed 5 times. Same thing comes when you're writing learning objectives. Like, oh, I took, stretch my brain in order to come up with different verbs, but you want it to look unique. Eliminate any jargon. Don't throw in acronyms if people aren't going to recognize them. And try to quantify the impact. And people dread this part, but it makes such a difference because everybody's moved to data-driven decision making. We want to know, did you improve customer satisfaction? Did you increase revenue? Did you improve your efficiency? What can you measure with dollars, with numbers, with percentages, with satisfaction scores, with net promoter scores, with whatever it is? And if you can't, go with a qualitative answer to that. You got positive feedback from your manager. It became the template. The model that you put forward became the template that was used on an ongoing basis. So that's a little bit about that. And I think this is my last slide. We like interests. We recommend students do interests at the bottom. Please be interesting. Everybody says they love to go hiking, for example. Or they love sports. Well, dress it up a little bit. So, I mean, all of these captured our eyes. Like, these are things you're like, oh my God, I want to talk to you about this. And that's really the point of the interest, is to help make you seem like a more rounded human being. You're not just there to work, because remember that people are interested in working with people that they want to connect with. And so whether you're stuck at an airport together or working late at night together, or you're the person that, you're the one I'm going to have lunch with every day, are you going to be interesting to me? And I will sometimes choose that over the best person for the job, because I'd rather spend all of my time, all of my working hours with you. So long as you can, do the basics of the job and you can learn the things that you don't know. So that is it for the formal presentation. Looks like we have about 10 minutes left for any additional questions.
I do have a couple more questions, Marcus. The first is it necessary to write down the year that you graduate, or is it not necessary anymore? I guess that's a new trend that people are not writing down the year that they graduate.
Oh, that's a good question. It doesn't come up with business school students because they're all so young, but it's something I've thought about since I'm not so young. I think if you're on the older side, it's okay not to list the graduation year. It does beg questions about age discrimination once you get past a certain point.
And then in terms of formatting, can you stack experience based on similar positions if they are in different departments or company? And then just combine the bullet points since the job is similar.
I guess the rule of thumb I always use is you don't ever want either a formal or an informal reference check. And somebody asked, and you said something that was not accurate or was not true. And the person's like, what? She never worked on that project. No, because that is a huge red flag. Now, if you're taking two things that are, well, I did this at this one company, I did this at this other company, and in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of consolidate them, or especially, and this happens a lot with our students, I had this role and then I got promoted. I don't want to do the same bullet across these two roles. Yeah, just choose where you're going to place that. But I think the important thing is that you're writing your resume with integrity, so that you're not ever misleading.
The next question is, can too much education prevent your marketability?
Yes. Too much education, also too much experience, because sometimes people are looking for jobs, for people to do jobs, and they don't necessarily want the most senior person to do it because that person may get bored or want more money than they're willing to pay. So, unfortunately, that can be an issue, and it is. Same thing with age.
Great, thank you.
And I'm not saying that that's legal or right, but it is how people make decisions.
Okay, great, thank you. I think that's all the questions I have. If anyone else has any question, feel free to put them in the chat. Carolyn, yeah.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I'm sorry I missed the part about how to access the Slido, but my question is, when my background's in the humanities, when you need to quantify accomplishments, but you don't really know how to put that into numbers, what's the best workaround?
Can you give me a little more of an example?
So let's say your value proposition includes all kinds of really great skills, but you can't measure whether they increased sales or saved the company money or increased audience size.
From here at UCLA in a higher education context, or something on the outside?
I think anything really. Like, again, how does someone who's not a graphs and charts and numbers person quantify things for a hiring manager who, whether he or she is or not a graphs and charts person, might want to see those numbers sort of encapsulated. They might want to see how you've quantified your achievements.
Well, I would say do your best. Not everything can be quantified or should be quantified, but some things should be quantified. If you're really struggling, I would talk to your colleagues and say, hey, how did you think about that? Sometimes I'll send our students to go talk to their previous employers. Hey, that project that I started, how did that work out? But it is something that most employers are looking for. Now, if you're in a purely creative environment, maybe there's a case where a portfolio or a storytelling is more important. But I would just push, to quantify what you can quantify, and recognize that not every bullet needs to be quantified.
We have a question in the chat. How do you include relevant undergrad coursework in the industry that you're interested in but do not have a master in, especially when your job function is administrative and you're trying to get your foot in the door of another function?
I would say different ways. So you could list the education section and the coursework colon. If you didn't finish the degree, you could say the degree pursued, or like still in progress. Or you could go the other direction and put it down below in an interest or additional section, and just create a bullet that says coursework colon. One thing I didn't talk about that I should have talked about is there are two audiences for your resume frequently. One is a hiring manager or recruiter, human beings, and the other one is an applicant tracking system, or what we sometimes call a bot. And the bot may just be looking for keywords. And so coursework interests can be an easy way to put keywords in there that demonstrate that you have the skills that are relevant. So it is good to get the right words in there in your resume somewhere. I see Tara asked a question, or Tara, when did the trend of adding interests into a resume begin? I don't know, but I've seen it for a very long time. So, and I don't know if that varies. Obviously, I'm in the business sector. I don't know if you're more in a STEMmy area that, you know, people do less of that. We certainly encourage our students to do that. And I know I've been listing it since I graduated from college. It's a long time ago.
Okay, and our last question is, should you leave off education to not seem overqualified?
Personal choice, I probably wouldn't. If you're really that overqualified and they perceive you that way, it's probably not going to be a good fit. Sometimes people are doing you a favor by not advancing you for a role. Because they know that you're not going to be the right fit there. And sometimes that's the right answer. You just don't want to hear it.
Thank you. I guess
I see a
yeah,
couple
one
last
last question.
questions that popped up. Anant, is it okay to change industries? I guess that's all up to you. I mean, you know, I can't answer that for you. Generally, I don't know. I would say, you know, you might look into a career coach to have that conversation with. So last question, I see Ziba said, thank you. Do we offer consulting advising on resume and cover letters for UCLA staff? Sadly, no. I think we might spend all of our time doing that. We, you know, at the Parker Career Management Center, our job is to support the full-time MBA students. Happy to do presentations like this. And if you have questions about resources or quick questions on, you can reach out to me via email. Maybe Grace, if you don't mind, when you share the slides, including my contact information, that's okay. But you know, we get paid for to support these MBA students.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Marcus. Thank you everyone for joining us.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Thank you all for participating, and
Thank you.
a lot of great
Thank
participation.
you. And we
Thanks
will
for
have
organizing.
Chris, thank you. And we will have Chris Weber on February 17th, Friday, February 17th, to talk about interview skills. So I hope you will join us then. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.